Hello, I am politically correct all the time, 24/7, 365, and I'm politically correct because I am a conservative. Good morning, this is Ron. It is Friday, June the 28th, and this is The Drill. Thank you very much, and I'm Ronald T. Hardgrove, and this is my podcast called The Drill, and let me see where we at here. There we go. Whoops, wrong one. And anyways, this is my podcast called The Drill. This is about true conservatism and what it is and why it makes a difference, why it matters. And it can be, it's thanks to Spreaker.com, and you can hear it on iTunes and Spotify and Google Podcasts, among others. And see, there we go. Now we're getting somewhere. So let's see. There we go. So I started my Sociopolitical Odyssey as a conservative Republican when I was about 18 years old. I voted for Ronald Reagan, and I assumed that I was a conservative because of where I stood on the issues. However, whenever I engaged a liberal in debate, even though I knew I was right, I felt as though I was losing the argument. And I also noticed that right-wing pundits that I listened to on the radio struggled as well. If I know that I'm right, but I'm losing the argument, then something is wrong. And it was then that I decided to dig a little deeper and investigate. I started by reading a book by Ayn Rand titled Philosophy, Who Needs It? I learned from the book that philosophy is an inescapable, inherent part of life, including politics. I also learned about defining one's terms and arbitrary claims. I discovered that life and politics are not about personal identity, but right and wrong. What is right? Making the presumption for the status quo. In other words, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Why? Because making the presumption for change is pointless and unstable. A dog chasing its tail. A novel that never gets published because of endless revisions. Who's right? True conservatives are right because the main thing that they're looking to do is, or to conserve, is the presumption for the status quo. Politically speaking, what is the status quo? Governmental neutrality. Ultimately, true conservatives want the government to remain a neutral third party. This is true conservative, truly conservative. So who's wrong? Everyone that promotes issues-based politics. Deciding things on the issues guarantees that government will be and remain biased. Most pundits are issues-based conservatives. This is wrong, because issues-based conservatives are wrong. They can't win. The only way to win is to be a true conservative. So also true conservatives know that the individual is primary. They think about and look at things from the standpoint of the individual. They don't get trapped into we. You'll hear a lot of people say, well, what do we do about this? What do we do about that? What they're doing is making the presumption for organization, making the presumption for socialism. You have to say, the true conservative has to defeat that. You can't proceed with that question, what do we do, and try to answer that question, because any answer you come up with is going to be organized, collective, and socialist. A word about the left. In reality, they really have no power, they have no authority, and they can't win. The only reason they appear to win is because Republicans hand them their victories. Now, talk show hosts, the reason that, or the biggest mistake that they make is in failing to make distinctions. One of the cultural things that has happened to this country is that we all fail to make distinctions, judgmental distinctions between, say, Republican and Democrat, conservative and liberal, capitalist and socialist. Republican, conservative, capitalist is better. Conservatives need to remind the public of the superiority of their beliefs every opportunity they get. That's right, superiority. It's better. We are better. Our ideas are better, and we are better people. Eric Trump the other day got spit on by a supposedly tolerant liberal lefty when he was out doing he was just out in public. So he got spit on. That is the opportunity for Rush Limbaugh to come out and tell his listeners, instead of saying something like, how come, can you imagine if a Republican had spit on a Democrat, especially if they spit on a black Democrat, what would happen then? The media would go bananas. They'd be calling for his resignation. No, that's not the way you should handle that. What you should say is, see, we are better than they are. The left spits on people. The right, the conservatives, we refrain from doing such ugly and abhorrent activities. Make everybody know that we are better. And if you're not sure you can do that, then you've got to ask yourself, don't I believe that conservatism, or actually I should say, don't I know that conservatism is better? And if I don't, then I need to either get educated or quit calling myself a conservative. So let me be clear. Being truly conservative is realistic, effective, and true. Anything else is idealistic, ineffective, and false. Or to put it more simply, being truly conservative is right, and everything else is wrong. So that's an introduction to my podcast. I wanted to cover, this morning I was listening to Hugh Hewitt and to Glenn Beck, and they were on about the so-called debates. One of the things that I want to talk about, and they talk about it in Out of the Ashes, reclaiming American culture. One of the things that you reclaim is truth, and you do so by reclaiming your language. What are called debates in this country are not debates. They are joint interviews. And that's what occurred last night and the night before. A whole bunch of people took the stage, and they were interviewed jointly. And then they sort of argued amongst each other as to who is farther left or farthest left. So, and most of it was not worth watching. It wasn't worth listening to, and was just crap. So, and of course, Hugh Hewitt and Glenn Beck got it wrong in terms of their analysis, but to be expected because they're issues-based conservatives. The presidential candidate Pete B. said Thursday, and I'm taking this is an article from the Washington Times, any Republican who supports the separation of migrant children from their parents at the border has, quote, lost all claim to ever use religious language again, unquote. Quote, the Republican Party likes to cloak itself in their language of religion. We should call out hypocrisy whenever we see it, unquote, the Indiana Democrat said. Quote, for a party that associates itself with Christianity, to say that it's okay to suggest that God would smile on the division of families at the hands of federal agents, that God would condone putting children in cages, has lost all claim to ever use religious language again, unquote, South Bend mayor said. Now, let's see, Mr. B, who has been vocal about his Episcopalian faith, added that criminalizing border crossings is, quote, the best of family separation, unquote. So one of the things that this is tempting, and both Glenn Beck and Hugh Hewitt fell into this trap, was defending the Republican Party. Okay, because it looks tempting. Let's see now, we're saying lost all claim to ever use religious language. So those are some trigger words right there. Hypocrisy is another trigger word. Let me see. Christianity, division of families, God, children in cages. They're all trigger words because if you really listen or read carefully what he said nothing. He said nothing. He fails to define his terms, and his claim is arbitrary. He provides no evidence, no proof of anything. And again, he doesn't really make any kind of a claim anyways. Supports the separation of migrant children from their parents at the border. Okay, what are you talking about? What do you mean, the separation? What? This is, again, where true conservatives have to keep an open mind. This is tempting to say, well, Pete B is a liberal. I'm a conservative. So if Pete B says that Republicans shouldn't be able to claim to use, that they're not religious in essence because they support migrant children being taken away from the parents at the border, well, he's got to be wrong. So I have to defend the Republicans in general and the Republican Party more specifically. And so you struggle to defend the Republican Party in this particular case. Wrong. That's reactionary, traditionalist. Okay, perhaps Republican, but it's not conservative. The true conservative keeps the open mind and looks at the situation from the standpoint of, and reminds himself, I've got an open mind, okay, convince me. So that's Mr. B's, Mayor B, needs to convince me that the Republicans and Republican Party should not use any type of religious language ever again. You got to convince me. So what are you talking about when you say the separation of migrant children from their parents? Let's see. You say the Republican Party is full of hypocrisy. How so? Where? For a party that associates itself with Christianity, to say it is okay to suggest that God would smile on the division of families at the hands of federal agents. What does that mean? What are you talking about? That God would condone putting children in cages. Again, I don't know what you're talking about. What do you mean? Where's the proof? Where's the evidence of any of these things? Okay. And then he says, criminalizing border crossings is the basis of family separation. And again, I don't know what the hell that means, other than I've heard from last night somebody, and it may have been Mayor B, suggest that anybody that comes across the border illegally should not be put into jail, taken into custody. It should be considered a civil matter. And they should be perhaps subject to a lawsuit, but they should not be put in jail. But again, it's easy to listen to all these trigger words. You get mad, and it's happened to me many times, where a lefty hits my buttons and uses just the right words, and I start to go off. Get all defensive. The problem with getting defensive is it makes you look guilty. It makes you look like you have a guilty conscience. The best way to handle the situation is simply to do it with an open mind and ask questions. And then when you ask questions, the left will never answer them, because the left is always bluffing. It always pretends to have information that it doesn't really have. So you need to, again, be careful of that. And listen for it. When you're listening to Rush Limbaugh and this today, and you hear about Mayor B, see how he handles it. See if he doesn't come out and defend Republicans and Republicanism and the Republican Party, and perhaps even himself. Maybe he just assumes that Mayor B is also talking about Rush Limbaugh. But if he does defend him, he's doing it wrong. And listen when he starts defending Republicans, and see if he doesn't sound, as I've said, like somebody with a guilty conscience. Because that's exactly, it's a losing proposition. It makes you look bad. It makes your followers look bad, or make Rush Limbaugh's followers look bad, and you shouldn't do it. It's wrong. When I come back, I'm going to be reading the concept of the day from the Ayn Rand lexicon. Thank you very much. And the concept of the day for today is government grants and scholarships from the Ayn Rand lexicon. The fundamental evil of government grants is the fact that men are forced to pay for the support of ideas diametrically opposed to their own. And by the way, I want to say that in this particular entry, she's wrong. And at the end of the entry, I will explain why she's wrong. The fundamental evil of government grants is the fact that men are forced to pay for their support of their ideas diametrically opposed to their own. This is a profound violation of an individual's integrity and conscience. It is viciously wrong to take the money of rational men for the support of B.F. Skinner or vice versa. The Constitution forbids a government establishment of religion, properly regarding it as a violation of individual rights. Since a man's beliefs are protected from the intrusion of force, the same principle should protect his reasoned convictions and forbid governmental establishments in the field of thought. How would Washington bureaucrats, or congressmen for that matter, know which scientists to encourage, particularly in so controversial a field as social science? The safest method is to choose men who have achieved some sort of reputation, whether their reputation is deserved or not, whether their achievements are valid or not, whether they rose by merit, pull, publicity, or accident, are questions which the awarders do not and cannot consider. When personal judgment is inoperative, men's first concern is not how to choose, but how to justify their choice. This will necessarily prompt committee members, bureaucrats, and politicians to gravitate toward prestigious names. The result is to help establish those already established, i.e. to entrench the status quo. Let me see. So, anyways, like I said, and it goes on and on and on. Wow, this is a long, long entry. But I'm going to nip it in the bud and just say she's wrong about the part about being forced to pay taxes. I've heard this from a lot of objectivists and libertarians. Well, people are forced to pay taxes, and therefore we're forced to pay for, whatever it is that the taxes go for, in this particular case for grants. And it's crap. And the reason it's crap is, yes, we are forced to pay taxes. That part of it is true. We are not forced to pay for the, because all the taxes go into a pool. Then the government representatives get together and decide how to divvy that money up. Some goes to the Defense Department, some goes for grants. Okay? And then they decide, somebody makes a decision as to who will receive those grants. Probably a bureaucrat. But the point is, your and my representatives do that. They make the decision to supply money for grants. And you are free, and I am free, to go to my representative and say, I don't want any money going for grants. It's corrupt, it's wrong, it's a bad idea. And I happen to think that part of it is right, that it's not a good idea for the federal government to be picking, again, it's a non-neutral activity. The ultimate thing that we're trying to conserve as conservatives is governmental neutrality. And so in the grant system, you're picking winners and losers, as she explains. That's true. But the idea that we're not free somehow, or that we're forced to pay taxes, therefore we're forced to pay for grants, is wrong. Our representatives then get together, they decide how to spend the money, they make budgets, they make all those decisions, and you and I are free to go to our representatives and tell them that I don't want you to support this. I want you to vote no if it comes up for a vote. So, and if your representative doesn't do that, then you're free to attempt to get them recalled or to vote for somebody else in the next election. Okay, that's the way it is. Now, if you get outvoted, if your guy goes in there and says, yes, I'm not going to vote for this, it's no good, and he gets outvoted by everybody else, that's called democracy. It's called a republic, a democratic republic. That's the way it works. Okay, so it's the same thing if you had direct democracy. Maybe you go out and vote in your state for, if you have a referendum or a initiative system, and you vote for a ballot measure, and it fails because everybody else voted against it. What do you say? Well, I'm forced? No. And if you think that, and you're also free, by the way, if you don't like the system of government, is go away and go somewhere else. For instance, let's say the military. Let's say that you decide that you're pacifist and you can't stand the idea of any money going to the military, and you get outvoted. You're free always to move to a country, renounce your citizenship, and move to a country that either has no military or has a military that doesn't get used very often. Let's say New Zealand or Tonga. Tonga, I don't think, has a military. Okay, I'm sure they depend on other people for their defense. So there you go. You're pacifist and you don't want to spend money. See any money, tax money spent on the military, move to Tonga. Solve the problem. But the idea that you're forced to pay for military or any other type of activities is baloney. Yes, you're forced to pay taxes, but how those taxes are spent is up to your representative and other representatives. So that was the government grants was the concept of the day from the Ayn Rand lexicon. And I like to read the concept of the day to remind everybody that it is concepts that are important, concepts and abstractions that are important. That's modern society. Concepts and abstractions using, the other way to go is to do storytelling and verbal picture painting. Okay, those are two basic ways to communicate. Now, storytelling and verbal picture painting are more vivid. They will create some vividness. However, abstractions and concepts are clearer and easier to understand. So sometimes you want to use a story or paint a verbal picture in order to allow somebody to abstract in their own way, especially if it's something, a new term that somebody hasn't heard before. But other than that, we want to communicate conceptually, we want to abstract. It's the way modern men, modern human beings communicate. Okay, so that's the reason I like to emphasize the concept of the day. Back in a minute. All right, thank you very much. Welcome back. And so now I want to play a little clip from the Glenn Beck show, and this was from a couple of days ago.
Yesterday I posted something about Project Veritas. I said this is the most important story, possibly one of the top 3 stories of the year. I think it's the most important story because it's showing how Google is trying to manipulate you, what their plans are to control information, and to control and program people. It is a very important story. I had so many people write back or tweet, "Oh yeah, right, like you're not talking about the woman who Donald Trump raped." Are you kidding me? You believe this? Here's the Trump accuser on CNN with Anderson Cooper, who knows he's in the Titanic.
Okay, so anyways, he goes on to play a clip from the Anderson's interview with the lady that claims that she was raped, and it's a bizarre interview, and he cuts to a commercial right away. So where he's going wrong here, Glenn Beck, is where he says, people write to him and say, you're not talking about the woman that was raped by Donald Trump. And they're stating it as though it is a fact of reality. And so then he says, "Are you kidding me? Are you taking this seriously?" So he is making the mistake that most issues-based conservatives make, and that is, if the left is saying X, I've got to say, or if put it this way, if the left is saying A, I've got to say Z. I've got to say exactly the opposite of whatever it is that the left is saying. If this left is promoting something, I've got to demote it. I've got to oppose it, just reflexively. That's not conservative. It's traditionalist and reactionary. The right way to have handled this is simply to go right to it. Again, have the open mind. Really, that's the way I would respond. Somebody says, you're not talking about Donald Trump raping that woman. Really? When did Donald Trump rape the woman? Who did he rape? Make them earn it. And I've said this before and over and over and over again in my broadcasts. If the left is going to win, make them earn it. Don't hand them a victory. Don't give it away. Okay? Make them earn it. Make them spell out every single damn detail. Make them put everything together in an ironclad, logical way. If you, as a lefty, can convince me that I'm wrong, fine. Great. But what I'm not going to do is allow somebody to bully or intimidate me. Okay? And that's usually what goes on. Little games, little tricks, little psychological maneuvers like what they did when they sent him the emails. Oh, you're not talking about Donald Trump raping that woman, knowing, again, that this is going to trigger Mr. Glenn Beck into going into his conservative mode, his alleged conservative or issues-based conservative mode, and simply react. Well, I don't know what you're talking about. Donald Trump didn't rape anybody. Donald Trump's not a rapist. He's married. He loves women. His daughter's a woman. And you end up looking like a jackass. Don't fall for it. Don't do all the work. Again, here Glenn Beck is about to go through this big explanation and put on his little clip and go on and on and on and on, and the liberal hit him with just one simple sentence question. And it wasn't even a question, a statement. Oh, sure, you're not going to deal with President Trump, the rapist. And now Glenn Beck has to waste his time and waste a lot of energy, okay, instead of make the lefty work for it. And you do that by asking questions. Really? Donald Trump is a rapist? Who did he rape? When did this happen? Oh, it was in a department store? Was this during the daytime? Really? And so there was no security around? There was no employees around? Did he use a weapon? Did he hold a knife to her throat? Did he put a gun to her head? I mean, those are the questions I'm asking. If President Trump is a rapist, I want him gone. I want him impeached on the spot. Okay, but Donald Trump is an American. He deserves due process, just like everyone else does. Okay, so first thing to do if you're going to convince me to impeach Donald Trump because he raped somebody is convince me that the rape actually occurred. When did it occur? How did it occur? Where? And a lot of this brings up a lot of questions. Did this take place in the daytime? He went into a shopping, a place to do shopping. I was going to keep wanting to say grocery store, but you go into a store and you go into a place to change your clothes. First of all, she invited him in. Did she invite him into they were both in the same changing room? She invited him into the changing room? That's what she did? Or did he invite himself? Get the details. That's what you need to do. Make them earn it. Make them work for it. Again, I'm open-minded. If you can convince me that President Trump is a rapist, and he did rape this woman, I want him gone. But you're going to have to convince me. And you're going to have to meet at least, the bar here is not going to be by preponderance of the evidence. Just barely more evidence to say yes than no. It's going to have to be for an impeachment. To have a sitting president impeached, it's got to be at least clear and convincing, and probably beyond a reasonable doubt. But again, the point here is, and I see pundit after pundit after pundit waste their time, they're tired, they're exhausted, they're frustrated because they keep dealing with arbitrary claims and they keep allowing their buttons to get pushed. Don't do it. Don't wear yourself out. Make them earn it. So, and let's see where we at here. There it is. Okay, now we're back. So anyway, who are the true conservatives? The true conservatives are people that understand that conservatism is not just political, but cultural as well. They're patriotic people who use common sense. They make judgments instead of predictions. And they speak clearly, definitively, and are not afraid to say no. They are open-minded, asking why rather than why not. They are consistent, credible, and influential. Not ashamed of their existence, unafraid to learn or correct their mistakes. They are normal Americans. So that brings me to the conclusion of another episode of The Drill. And until next time, thank you very much for listening, and have a great day.